Oh, hey, hi there. So, real quick, I wanted to jump on here and talk to you a little bit about color because I was on Instagram the other day. I get a lot of my inspiration for my art on Instagram, and I came across this woman who was selling some watercolor classes, and um, her production was just on fire. Like the lighting was perfect, the colors were perfect, and so I went to go check out her site and down that rabbit hole that you go down, right? And she's talking about her palette that she uses, and she uses a split primary palette. Okay, so there's a lot of debate about color theory, but this is what I believe, and I'll tell you why. I believe that the cyan, magenta, yellow is a better primary color palette than red, blue, and yellow because, um, they say that red's a primary color, but you can actually make red quite beautiful reds with magenta and yellow, but you can't make magenta, right? So those three colors will get you a beautiful range of colors. So that's the first thing is that I think that if you're going for a red, blue, and yellow primary color palette, you're going to be disappointed because um, either your greens are going to be garbage or your purples are going to be garbage or your oranges because that secondary colors just don't go that great. So a lot of people utilize what's called a split primary color palette where they do two yellows, a warm and a cool, and two reds, a warm and a cool, and two blues, warm and a cool. And that's what this particular artist promotes. And that's fine. That's not the color that I promote to my students, though. To my students, I promote the cyan, magenta, and yellow primary color palette because you can get beautiful purples and beautiful greens and beautiful oranges secondary colors with just those three colors. And you can get pretty good neutrals too. Okay, so it's not a big investment like six colors. You only really need magenta, cyan, and yellow. And for cyan, my recommendation is in watercolors a phthalo blue green shade, the pigment blue 15.3 because it it just has it's it just has nice qualities to work with if you're just getting three colors and you're going to do a primary. And then so rather than a split primary palette of the warm and the cool of the yellow, red, and blue, I utilize and teach to my students a secondary color palette which starts with the magenta, yellow, and cyan, which is that I use phthalo blue. I recommend phthalo blue, but there's some pretty blues that can make some really nice three color palettes. And and then for the second, then the after that, pick up your orange because you're never going to mix as bright of an orange as like pigment orange 73. You're just never going to mix it, okay? That's the brightest orange you can get, and you're not going to get it by mixing it. And then Diox purple for similar reason, and it's nice and dark and good mixing color. And then phthalo green has the biggest range, although I'm not that crazy about phthalo green, but really any green, okay, is going to be better than in my mind. So I thought, why do I do that? Why do I do that? So I had actually put together like I was going to do a book on this. Hold on a second. Yeah, so I'm going to get this. And what colors do I get? Because that's the biggest question that I would always get asked by my students. Do you really need professional watercolor? What's the difference? And, because it is hella expensive. I know that it is. Okay, and I would just say that it's highly more pigmented. But this is an affordable way to do it, is to start out with your primary. And I've done the wheels, so I'll just put this in there. Yes, so I've done the primary, then the secondary, and then the split primary. And they're all very close, but the most vibrant is the secondary palette. And that is what I recommend to my students, and that is why I recommend that to my students. And there's a variety of colors that you can use for your yellow, magenta, and cyan, but the one that I feel has the most range is, like I told you, and so Hansa yellow medium, pigment yellow 97. And I prefer quinacridone magenta, which is pigment red 122, but also quinacridone rose, pigment violet 19, is also makes a wonderful magenta for this particular application. And then phthalo blue green shade, it's pigment blue 15.3. Okay, so why do I tell you the pigment numbers? I'm going to tell you why I tell you the pigment numbers, because there is a limited amount of pigments that are utilized by all of the color manufacturers to make all of the colors. And I'm not talking about paints that are made with like aniline dyes or whatever they're called, dyes or chemical, but this is pigment based, okay? So um, everybody has a different name for their colors, and uh, but basically there's only so many pigments, like maybe around 100. Maybe there's slightly more than 100. There's not that many, okay? Definitely not as many as the different brands of colors. So the name is just a name, okay? So if you want to get the most bang out of your buck when you're buying watercolors, you do want to buy by pigment because it doesn't make the sense to have a Hansel yellow here, a Hansel yellow there, or whatever, Windsor yellow, or whatever they call it in their brand, when it's basically going to be the same paint, because other than the formulation of the binder, which is, gum arabic and maybe oxgall or those little nuances, or Memgram puts honey in theirs, the pigment is the same. Okay, so that's why I tell you the pigment information, because it doesn't really matter the brand, although some brands are better than others for different reasons. And I have the brands that I've had like complete products from would be Daniel Smith, M. Graham, Magellan Mission Gold, St. Petersburg White Knights. I've had some Sennelier. Oh, what other is a core? Okay, so I'll tell you my favorites and what I keep and what I have on hand. And that would be my number one favorite palette. And the first one that I got, and I researched for a long time, is the Magellan Mission Gold. That's it. The Magellan Mission Gold, that is my number one favorite. And the reason that is my number one favorite is that it is the most vibrant. And not only is it the most vibrant, and sometimes you're going to watch reviews about the Magellan Mission Gold watercolor, and you're going to hear them say, well, I don't understand why their ultramarine blue is not just pigment blue 29 like everybody else in the whole world's pigment blue is, because that's a single pigment and that would be better. But here's the deal. Magellan Mission Gold is a brand that is developed not only to be the most vibrant, it's also developed to minimize the color shift that happens with watercolor. I don't know if you've ever noticed this, but when you're painting with watercolor, when it's wet, it's gorgeous, right? And then it dries and it just looks like shit. It like dried, it's all dull now, and because there's a color shift from wet to dry. That's just a fact with watercolor. But Magellan Mission Gold formulates their watercolor to not have that color shift, okay? So that is why sometimes they have some unusual combinations in some colors, such as their ultramarine blue, which aren't just completely pigment blue 29. I'm gonna look and see what it is. Anyway, I'll show you this much loved palette, Magellan Mission Gold, because that's my favorite. These are the colors. Okay, so their pigment blue is actually pigment blue 29 and pigment blue 15.3, which is phthalo blue, right? And that is unusual. And also the brilliant violet is not just PV23 like most brands diox purple, but it's a mixture of pigment violet 3 and pigment blue 29 and pigment red 122, which we talked about as the magenta earlier that I like that I recommend. So yeah, that's why there's some unusual colors. And the other thing about that most vibrant is that I have a pretty good grasp of color theory, so I feel very confident that I can mute down a color or dirty up a color or make it less vibrant, but you cannot make it more vibrant. So out of all of the brands that I've ever tried, Magellan Mission Gold, that's the best as far as I'm concerned, because I'm going for vibrancy. I like vibrant color, and I feel like I can always tone it down, but I can't amp it up. And I appreciate the fact that there's a minimal drying shift. And that being said, my second favorite brand is Core, and because I love Core, I just love it. I love the way it moves in the water. Watercolor is wild, and Core is the wildest there gets. And then, oh, and Schmincke, I'm a fan of Schmincke as well. Okay, so Daniel Smith. Daniel Smith is really popular. I don't know why, but for some reason when I fill my palette with Daniel Smith colors, they go really fast. So I save my Daniel Smith purchases for colors that I can't get anywhere else, pigments that I can't get anywhere else. And they're granulating greens. Oh my god, nobody makes greens like Daniel Smith, okay? That Ultimate Undersea Sea Green and the Green Appetite Genuine, and there's a couple more I want to try, but the Cascade Green, I just, oh, right? They are top of the line. But for like your Magenta Pigment Red 122, yeah. Oh, okay, so Core. Core is my favorite of that. And also, and then my favorite of Teal Blue is Schmincke. I think that's just my personal favorite, but they're all real close, okay? There's two pigments that are utilized to make the Teal Blue watercolor, which is, one of them's Pigment 28, and one's Pigment Green 50, and the Pigment Green 50 is what Core uses, and Schmincke, and I do like that the best. But this is Pigment 28, so it's that beautiful cobalt teal color. But I don't think that, yeah, it might be a cobalt. Anyway, here's the other thing I recommend to my students that might be a little controversial. This is a water container. See, clean water, dirty water. And mine's dirty, but it also has ridges on this side, so you can get a pretty good clean on your brush, okay? I'm never going to mistake that for my coffee cup. I don't understand this whole jars or cups or glasses that you accidentally drink the water. I use cobalt and cadmium colors, and I don't worry about it because I'm not drinking the water, okay? And I don't recommend using glass jars or glasses or cups for your water container. I recommend these. They're basically less than $10 anywhere. You can pick them up, and just, it's better for your health. And they're cheap. And so yeah, that's what I recommend for that. Here's my 3 things, and I'll put a color, I'll put it like up there. And then yeah, I've done like all of these beautiful swatch sheets. That starts out with that primary Hansa Yellow Medium, which is Pigment Yellow 97, which is my favorite, but also the Pigment Yellow 154 is pretty good too. And then Magenta PR 122 is what I use, but also the Pigment Violet PV19 is also a nice magenta. And then the cyan being the Pigment Blue 15.3, and I adore the cobalt blue, so that's always going to be my bottom too. But anyway, so you can get these three, and you can have a wonderful, wonderful, wonderful mix of primary and secondary colors, and which you can go on to create lots and lots of colors. And then this would be with the secondary palette that we talked about. And yeah, so then I'm always doing these comparisons, right? So on the top is your primary. These are the secondary colors you're going to mix with the primary palette, which is, it's pretty good, right? And then this is the secondary palette I recommend. And then this would be your secondary palette, secondary colors with the split primary palette. So yeah, talk to you later, bye.